What's a deep, dark rabbit hole to research when bored? This should give you an hour or two. List of unusual deaths. Link. Charondas was a Greek lawgiver from Sicily, Italy. According to Diodorus Siculus, he issued a law that anyone who brought weapons into the assembly must be put to death. One day, he arrived at the assembly seeking help to defeat some brigands in the countryside, but with a knife still attached to his belt. In order to uphold his own law, he committed suicide. What an absolute Chad. A poodle named Cachi, in Caballito, Buenos Aires, fell 13 floors and hit Marta Espina, 75, killing both instantly. In the course of events, Edith Solá, 46, came to see the incident, and was fatally hit by a bus. An unidentified man who witnessed her death had a heart attack and also died on his way to the hospital. That poodle has 3:1 KD ratio. Stephen Winfrey, 50, became trapped and asphyxiated when rabbiting near Doncaster, England, after his head became stuck down a rabbit hole. Be careful around rabbit holes. Vallandigham, an American politician and lawyer who was defending a man accused of murder, accidentally shot himself while demonstrating how the victim might have done so. His client was acquitted. Holy lawyer literally sacrificed himself to prove his case. John Hutcherson, 21, drove home drunk with his friend, Francis Brom, 23, who was hanging out the passenger window while vomiting due to carsickness. Hutcherson drove off the road and sideswiped a telephone pole support wire, decapitating Brom. He continued the final 12 miles, 19 km, to his Atlanta, Georgia, U.S., home, parked in the driveway, and went to bed. A neighbor found Brom's headless body in the truck the next morning. Welp. Reminds me of that scene from Hereditary. The deacon St. Lawrence was roasted alive on a giant grill during the persecution of Valerian. Prudentius tells that he joked with his tormentors, "Turn me over, I'm done on this side." He is now the patron saint of cooks, chefs, and comedians. The fact that he became the patron saint of cooks, chefs and comedians makes this even funnier. Vladimir Likhonos, 25, a student of Kyiv Polytechnic Institute from Konotop, was killed when his chewing gum exploded. Likhonos had a habit of dipping his chewing gum in citric acid to increase the gum's sour taste. On his work table, police found about 100 grams, 3.5 Oz, of unidentified explosive powder which he used for chemistry studies. It resembled citric acid, and it is thought that he confused the two. The explosive was found to be 4 times stronger than TNT, and the explosion was possibly triggered either by reacting with Likhonos' saliva, or the pressure exerted by him chewing on the gum and explosive powder. 5 Gum Company hates this little trick that will literally blow your mind. Daniel John O'Brien, 31, committed suicide by jumping into one of the engines of a British Airways Boeing 747 at Piarco International Airport, Trinidad. He is said to have scaled an airport wall in the nude, attacked 4 security guards and stole their 4-wheel drive vehicle, drove the vehicle into the jet, then clambered out of the wreckage, smeared grease on his bleeding shoulder and hurled himself into one of the plane's engines. Now that's some fucking commitment. Denver Lee St. Clair, 58, was asphyxiated by an atomic wedgie administered by his stepson during a fight. After he had been knocked unconscious, the elastic band from his torn underwear was pulled over his head and stretched around his neck, strangling him. The stepson was sentenced to 30 years in prison. What you in for? Zeuxis, a Greek painter, died of laughter at his portrait of the goddess Aphrodite. The elderly woman who commissioned it had insisted on modeling for it. Mood. Monica Myers, the mayor of Betterton, Maryland, was carrying out maintenance work around the sewage tanks at the town's largest municipal facility. According to the Lawrence Journal-World, Myers fell 4 feet, 1.2 m, from the catwalks into a 15-foot, 4.6 m, aeration tank, filled with human waste which a deputy in the town's police department described as having the consistency of putty. Her body was found floating facedown by the town engineer the next day. This is the worst one. Poor woman drowned in human shit. Takuya Nagaya, 23, from Japan, started to slither on the floor and claimed he had become a snake. He died after his father spent the next 2 days head-butting and biting him to drive out the snake that had possessed him. His father must have felt dumb that the biting and headbutting didn't work. Abusive father concocts story that makes him sound like a morally upstanding person after his son dies of abuse. Kenneth Pinion died from injuries caused by anal sex with a stallion. What the fuck? Edit. What the actual hell? There is another. A 43-year-old Irish woman died of an anaphylactic allergic reaction after having sex with a German Shepherd. Its owner, Sean McDonnell, and the woman met in an internet chat room for bestiality. McDonnell was prosecuted and added to a sex offender list. Jonathan Capewell, 16, from Oldham, England, died from a heart attack brought on by the buildup of butane and propane in his blood after excessive use of deodorant sprays. He was reported to have been obsessed with personal hygiene. This one sounds like a chubby emu video. Parvat Gala Baria, 60, from Gujarat, India, bit a snake after the snake had bitten him. Both he and the snake died. Chad Baria. January 2019. An unknown 54-year-old man from Massachusetts, United States, died after eating a bag and a half of black licorice every day for a few weeks, which caused such low potassium levels in his body that his heart stopped. What the actual fucking fuck? Edmund Ironside, King of England in 1016, was allegedly stabbed whilst on a toilet by an assassin hiding underneath. Some say the assassin climbed up a ladder with a lance and shoved it up the castle poop hole. Ilda Vitor Maquil, 88, died in a hospital in Barra Mansa, Rio de Janeiro, allegedly as a result of nursing technicians injecting soup through her intravenous drip instead of her feeding tube. 318. Bold of Wikipedia to publish the joke that caused Martin of Aragon to die of laughter. Here's the joke: Martin was suffering from indigestion on account of eating an entire goose when his favorite jester, Bora, entered the king's bedroom. When Martin asked Bora where he had been, the jester replied with, "Out of the next vineyard, where I saw a young deer hanging by his tail from a tree," as if someone had so punished him for stealing figs. This joke caused the king to die from laughter. I think the joke relies on the sheer absurdity of someone punishing a wild deer by tying his tail to a tree for eating figs. It's a niche joke by today's standards, but in the Middle Ages, it probably slayed. Weird. There was a Greek philosopher named Chrysippus who supposedly died of laughter when he realized that a donkey had eaten all of his figs. What is so funny about animals eating figs? I just got done watering a friend's fig tree while they were out of town, and some raccoons ate some of the figs. Am I lucky to be alive? I have noticed before when scrolling through the list that a lot of the funny deaths involve figs in some capacity. It's possible that figs used to be a proto-meme, of sorts, and humanity just forgot what's so funny about it. Either way, it's weird how many times PPL die from laughing about figs. Gouverneur Morris died from an infection after using a whalebone to clear a blockage in his urinary tract. Right. That was totally what he was doing. No, people actually did that back then. Bladder stones and urinary tract infections, UTIs, can both block the urinary tract, and there weren't good treatments for either problem in 1816. The whalebone was hollow. It was an early form of catheter. February 20, 2022. A 28-year-old man in Rancho Bernardo, San Diego, California is believed to have been using a knife to mix protein powder into a container of water while driving. The man lost control and crashed into a parked car. When he struck the parked car, his car's airbag propelled the knife into his neck, fatally injuring him. In addition to the two vehicles, 4 other cars were involved in. What in God's name is so funny about animals eating figs that it has killed 2 people? I love that Randy Jackson's birdpitch is on the list. Edit. Yes, I meant Randy Johnson. I am just picturing the catcher throwing down a fastball sign. And Jackson, that's gonna be a no from me, dog. Clearly you meant Randy Johnson. I just spent an hour on the 21st century list. Some are just hilarious, like the guy who bit the snake or the launched bear. Shipwrecks. Been absolutely obsessed with them the past few days. There's so much to discover and learn about, and so much corruption as well as just interesting circumstances that these huge machines go down in. And adding to that, technical diving accidents. Especially in shipwrecks. You can dive down to the sunken Andrea Doria. that wrecked because another enormous ship collided sideways into it. Ship and collect first-class dinnerware as plunder. But people have died, seemingly becoming lost in the complete darkness of the halls inside, or user error in any capacity, such as not having the correct oxygen tank levels leading to hallucinations and false confidence that makes you drown. Edit. I can't thank you guys enough for all the media recommendations and personal anecdotes from these shipwrecks. I have a lot to binge for the next few weeks, and I am fascinated by the stories shared in these comments. I'm reading every one. The sea is completely indifferent, and if you fuck around you find out. The saved section of your Reddit user profile. I've saved so much shit and then promptly forgot about it. Just like I'm going to do with this thread. Money laundering and how laundered money flows around the world. Most info is public from gov agencies like the CIA and State Department. Yeah, not a cop but work in fintech and have done fraud and AML. Anti-money laundering, detection, computer stuff. It's pretty depressing. It def was eye-opening when I was younger, realizing how money laundering looks a lot like most tax evasion schemes. From a computer detection standpoint, they're almost the same thing when all you can view is, say, financial transactions and records. How many prominent banks, politicians, and authorities will alert on models built using the information in 1. How little cops and the government fund investigations and detection of such activities. Usually our models were just so some institution could check a box, and the unspoken truth was that the execs at large financial institutions didn't really put a lot of time or effort into our work, even when it was good. There's a reason the drug cartels operate with impunity, and the George Carlin bit was 100% right when he said the way to really fix a lot of ills in the world is to start forcing international bankers to see jail time when they knowingly operate with unsavory people. From Trump and the Clintons, this ill is bipartisan. On down to maybe some of your local bankers where you live, a lot of them probably deserve jail time when you start considering their financial statements in the light of how the world would probably look if we were all honest, law-abiding citizens. When I worked at a call center, we often had quiet times and the internet blocked most things. Unusual wiki articles kept me entertained for quite some time though. It's full of random strange things. The wiki for the timeline for far future events. If you want to feel insignificant and learn some shit, check this out. Link. Feral children. I had to stop reading these accounts because it made me too sad seeing over and over that the rescuers almost always killed the kids' animal families and the children pretty much never had any quality of life after. Research in this field is really weird. We have very few unbiased sources and it's not well documented. They loved the theme in the 19th century because it was what they saw as nature versus culture, and a lot of shady experiments were done. Basically the big question was, were those kids regular kids that got adopted by animals and never learned humans' ways and became feral, or were they mentally ill, delayed beforehand? There is a big chance that a lot of them were abandoned because they had some kind of cognitive deficiency and were found after weeks, not years by themselves. That was probably the case of Victor of Aveyron. When questioned about hypothesis about Victor of Aveyron, Shattuck said one is that the wild boy, though born normal, developed a serious mental or psychological disturbance before his abandonment. Precocious schizophrenia, infantile psychosis, autism. A number of technical terms have been applied to his position. Several psychiatrists I have consulted favor this approach. It provides both a motivation for abandonment and an explanation for his partial recovery under Itard's treatment. He had no survival skills and no defense mechanisms, so it seems likely that most of those children would die pretty quickly and not reach adulthood. Marie-Angélique Leblanc, on the other hand, was different. She spent 10 years in the wilderness, but she had a normal cognition and had been socialized before she escaped to live in the wilderness. She regressed but had exceptional survival and wilderness skills. She was also with another kid, an African slave who was later shot and killed, which probably helped with her cognitive skills even though they didn't use any articulated language. She was able to learn how to read and write and live in society. Later on she writes Histoire d'une jeune fille sauvage trouvée dans les bois de Dix ans. She is the only feral child who was able to be re-educated, and it's likely that she could have survived longer in the wild had she not been found, so I think it's very likely that most of them would have died shortly after had they not been found, and a lot probably did. Having a normal cognition and some socialization early on probably helped a lot though. The history of lobotomies and cannibalism. I have spent more time researching these topics than the time taken to write a 90-page essay. Super fascinating if you don't get grossed out. The domino effect that led up to World War I and then later World War II. It's interesting to learn about, but it's just a clusterfuck of easily preventable situations. My history professor would always say in college that some historians considered WW2 really WW1.5 and was just a continuation of WW1. WW2 was just WW1 storming out of the room after an argument and coming back while yelling and another thing. Ancestry. I once spent a full 36 hours researching my family history. I literally sat on my couch and traced my family back until they came from Europe. My kids were like WTF, but I would stop to make dinner and all. I just didn't sleep. Did I mention I was completely manic at the time and was more than obsessed? Edit. Holy damn. I didn't realize this would blow up. Thanks guys. I read about two sisters whose father's family was super proud of their Italian heritage. One of the sisters got tested and had no Italian ancestry. Her parents cracked a few jokes but dismissed it as a test error. A few years later their father passed away. Soon after that the other sister decided to get tested and her test also showed no Italian ancestry. They confronted their mother who swore it had to be a mistake. The test results included the fact that there was a man who shared 25% of the sister's DNA, meaning he had to be an uncle or grandfather, in the company's database. This guy was open to being contacted if the sisters were as well. The sisters agreed. The guy was their uncle, their father's older brother. When the father was 4 and the brother was 6, they were riding their bikes when an Italian lady approached them to ask if they wanted candy. The older brother stayed with the bikes and the younger brother accompanied the women to get the candy from her car. The younger brother was never seen again. The older brother had spent the rest of his life looking for his younger brother. He'd signed up for 23andMe in hopes of finding him. The reason why the sisters' tests showed no Italian ancestry was because the Italian family had kidnapped their father at a young age. It was very bittersweet for the uncle who found his brother too late, but got to meet his nieces and find out that his brother had still had a wonderful life. To be clear, the two sisters found out their Italian father wasn't Italian at all. He had been kidnapped at a young age by an Italian family who raised him as their own. Caving and cave diving accidents. Accidentally watched one in YouTube, then went down the rabbit hole. This led to some more parallel topics of horrible fates, bad deaths etc. After few days, started getting disturbed sleep as this became my routine of watching before the sleep time. With self-restraint, finally I got out of it. People who go missing. This one I'm particularly fascinated with for some reason. Maybe it's because I like this YouTuber and how he formats his videos, but I've watched this video about a missing Canadian girl 3 times. Link personally. I think she was groomed by a dude she met online and that guy kidnapped her and is holding her captive, like the Joseph guy from Austria years back.